Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is the 7th installment of the long-going action franchise Mission Impossible. The film was written by Bruce Geller, Eric Jendrison and Christopher McQuarrie, and once again McQuarrie directed this film. The plot is about Ethan Hunt and his IMF team who must track down a dangerous weapon before it falls into the wrong hands. Now, my experience with the Mission Impossible franchise has gotten much more satisfying since the 4th film, Ghost Protocol from 2011, but just to briefly discuss all of the previous films. Mission Impossible from 1996 by Brian De Palma is a strong start of the franchise, and it's full of excitement and intensity. Next we have Mission Impossible 2 from 2000 and by John Woo, and to be honest with you, this was not for me. It was very over the top. It's very 2000s. I think it's a bit of a cult classic. I think some people love it and yeah, some people hate it, but I'm one of those people that, nah. It doesn't click for me, unfortunately. Then we had Mission Impossible 3 from 2006, directed by J.J. Abrams, which is fine. I don't remember that much about the film, except the terrifying performance from the great Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain. Then quite a few years later we have Mission Impossible 4 Ghost Protocol from 2011, directed by Brad Bird. As I mentioned, was the start of something very satisfying and different that the direction was going for this franchise. The start of something bigger and better for the plot, the characters, and of course the action and stunts by Tom Cruise. Continuing with Mission Impossible 5 Ghost Nation, and this was when Christopher McQuarrie came to took over as director and one of the writers. The film got pretty much better with the enjoyment, excitement and satisfaction. And then a few years later we had Mission Impossible 6 Fallout from 2018. My god, this film was the one that delivered everything. This is when Tom Cruise and Chris McQuarrie went all in on this franchise, and as I mentioned, it absolutely delivers. I still consider Fallout to be one of the greatest action films, and this is when I started to feel much more confident, and I relied on both Tom Cruise and Chris McQuarrie on what they were going to do next on the 7th installment. Now here we are in 2023 with Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning Part 1, and I wouldn't say it's as good as Mission Impossible Fallout. However, I still loved this film. I had a blast with it. 2023 has honestly been a pretty great year for action films for both the big and small screen. For example, John Wick Chapter 4 and Extraction 2. And from artists like Cruise, who wants to make sure we, the audience, are given the experience to enjoy and remember, making sure for us as well we are getting our money and time's worth of what is being shown to us. And I'm specifically talking about the action, the set pieces, the practical effects and the stunts. They were superior to watch. It was thrilling and fun non-stop. I honestly couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It was full of heart-pumping and nail-biting stuff. I would say my favourite moment from the action scenes would be the train crash sequence in Norway. As you would have seen from the second trailer, you would see Tom Cruise and Hayley Atwell hanging off this coach of a train, trying not to fall in the sea when the bridge has been destroyed. It is intense, and it was presented in this constant anxious state. The action scenes in Rome, Venice, and that particular motorbike stunt in Norway were all excellent to watch. The film has some great acting, chemistry, and necessary characters to be in the plot. Trust me, this aspect did a much better job than other films like Fast X. Tom Cruise with his IMF team being Rebecca Ferguson, Vin Rames and Simon Pegg all once again have great chemistry, and just putting them all together works really well as a team, and it's all believable and likeable from their chemistry. The film also stars Vanessa Kirby, Pom Klementieff, Shea Wiggum, Craig Tarzan Davis, Charles Parnell, Frederick Schmidt, Carrie Ells, Mark Gatiss, Indira Varma and Rob Delaney were all fantastic in the film. Henry Czerny's return as Kittredge I thought was a delight, and I loved this one scene which you would have saw in the 2 trailers of both Kittredge and Ethan Hunt having this one-to-one conversation, and it is really intense stuff, and it does a great job at kicking off the plot. What the scene also does, including the film itself, has some really nice Dutch and high angle shots as well, that the first film actually did when the 2 characters previously met. Asai Morales as the main villain Gabriel I thought performed a chilling and edgy performance, but the standout for me would have to be Hayley Atwell as a new character named Grace. I thought she was incredible in this film. I loved her background and I loved the chemistry between her and Tom Cruise, specifically how they both meet in the film unexpectedly and the differences they have with the MacGuffin of the film. In addition addition, how both Hunt and Grace help each other out, and then sometimes when they trick on each other as well. And even with Hunt giving Grace the opportunity to make a change for herself for the better, I think it's a really fantastic character dynamic and development for Grace. Regarding the plot being about the IMF against the threat of AI, as known as the Entity in this film. Now, I do feel with the plot and the conflict of this film, it is excessive, it is a bit ridiculous, and it's also going for like a sci-fi direction for the Mission Impossible franchise. However, it is pretty current and appropriate for our time, as we are now seeing the rise of AI and what it is capable of, for both being exciting and indeed questionable. How the Entity was handled in this film was chilling, unstoppable, unpredictable, and the most challenging enemy Ethan Hunt and the team have ever faced. It does make the stakes go high and life-changing effects for all of the characters. When the film goes into the dialogue and discussing about the Entity, it actually does mess with your mind. It is the classic what to believe and what not to believe from who. For example, I won't try not give away too much, but there is a scene in Venice when Ethan is on the run and Benji is guiding him, as that's what he normally does with his technology, to go to the right directions. But as the scene goes on, the Entity hacks into Benji's laptop, copies his voice and tells and guides Ethan where to go, which makes it more opposite for him and even more dangerous and unknown. And I thought that set piece was executed really well. Now, with a lighter note is the humour. I surprisingly thought it worked, and I'm normally not a fan when a blockbuster film may force too much humour. This film definitely does not do that, and it knows when it needs to be funny and when to be serious. Now, what I love most about the chase sequence in Rome is the scene when both Hunt and Grace need to go and find this getaway car. And they come across these like deluxe, rich and expensive cars. But what they don't expect is the technology picks this classic tiny yellow Fiat. From there, it absolutely makes sense to be more humorous than serious, and I was reminded of like a 1980s Roger Moore James Bond film. Dead Reckoning Part 1 is a 2 hour and 45 minute film, but this felt like a good 90 to a 100 minute film as it flies by. So it does a great job of not making the experience to be over bloated and, hypothetically speaking, over long. As this is part 1 out of a 2-parter, this film does finish with a to be continued, of course. But not from an annoying cliffhanger like... I hate bringing this film up. Like Fast X did. And I never felt frustrated, impatient and desperate for part 2 to come out immediately, because part 1 provided enough amusement and information from the script, and within that being a full package. So as much as I'm excited about Dead Reckoning Part 2 for next year, I feel patient and satisfied enough to wait. I think my only issue with Dead Reckoning Part 1 is the main villain Gabriel. Nothing to do with his motivations, and I actually liked how both him and Ethan Hunt had conflict in the past, making that conflict to be much stronger and personal. My problem is though that I found his personality to be wooden and emotionless. But thinking about it, maybe that is the point. Maybe he's trying to be like the Entity. I'm just guessing here. Having to be emotionless because AI, realistically, can't really have any emotions. I'm not saying Gabriel is a robot or anything like that. But whether it is they do in part 2 of Dead Reckoning, I'm expecting from people like Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie to make something much bigger. And when this film does eventually come out next year, I shall be there on day one. And to be honest with you, it is possibly my most anticipated film 2024. In the end, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is another example of why I love action in filmmaking, full of fun and thrills, and it is worth seeing on the big screen. And everything was all paid off extremely well. Based on my Letterboxd rating, I'm going to give Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 a 5-star out of 5. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below about the film. And if you liked what you watched, feel free to subscribe and look out for more videos coming your way.